welcome to Rio.
Thanks a lot. Well, actually, this video is a recording of my final year project in Strathclyde University, and well, me myself also runs a few podcasts, and I thought to have Ryoga to interview me, and usually I interview others,
Yes.
and this time I got interviewed by you, and thanks a lot, Ryoga.
Yeah, we're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
We work out some of question to talk about your project, because for me it's quite interesting your project where you have this like all the participation where you say in podcast and
Yeah.
event and curation, right?
Yeah.
And then it might be have related to your personal interest in a way,
Yeah.
right? And then like have meeting all these people around sharing different topics and the different things, like does that motivate you to do this more?
Well, I must say, first of all, it's because of my personal interest in a way. It's not straightforward as I thought that it somehow developed, because for me, I never thought to study architecture at the first point. It's just somehow that I stepped into architecture school and then enroll into foundation classes and all. And then I think after the undergrads and start to realize a lot of things, like what can we do after architecture or with the cert, and plus the friends around me, they are pretty much active, like Jowin and Hazik. They run different kind of initiative. So like Jowin, he recently launched this platform called Beyond Architecture Outlet. So it's kind of like a platform to engage with different kind of people who are architectural graduates, but doesn't mean that they have to practice as an architect in a way. I think that's something to do that later on we can talk about architectural education, that somehow, I won't say it's limited, perhaps it's limited at some point, and we are actually quite capable to do a lot of things because architectural knowledge is very generalized. So it's kind of like a frustration in this project, in a way that why we learn so much but we can do so little, and then we can only work for the rich people or the developers to sustain our life. So that's pretty much the project about, this kind of survival and also competition, to think about what are the future practice of architectural practice. Yeah.
And then you did mention, we talk a lot about this stuff, right? And then like you did mention that there's the word limited, and like I remember in our previous conversation you talk about obsolete as well. As the package, limited and obsolete.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that more? Because I think it's related to your project really well.
Yeah, perhaps I can add on to what I said earlier, because before that I also did helping moderating a panel discussion. It's titled called Other Ways of Doing Architecture, and we invited different kind of architects, but they do things that beyond our architectural framework and understanding. And in speaking of limited or obsolete, I think the point that I wish to address is that limited in a sense we can do more than we think. So and really think about, like, if let's say we are focusing on the architectural practice, we are keep on building in a way. I believe that you share the same concern as well, in a way. If let's say like Ivanka talking about Murakami, and then you were talking about the deer meat and venison meats, and all those things are kind of political in a way, or environmental. And speaking of the research, it's not really directly pointed at the architecture, because architecture in the end, we have the product in a way, use drawings or illustrations to tell our proposal.
Correct.
But then if we break down the whole project timeline, we do have 5A and 5B. So 5A is almost like non-architectural in a way, because we have to engage, perhaps you already engaged like farmer or butcher to know more, because we are not in their position. So limited and obsolete is not really a negative thing, but rather it's an admittance of our capability and our ability in a way that we should collaborate with other people. So it's not saying that you are limited means that you are dying in this industry, but of course it opens up this kind of limitation and constraints, open up more conversation with other people. So that's what I thought, and that comes with my point that I wanted to do event, because personally I also quite active with events and moderation and curations, and I really like the fact that there are two persons that I really like. One is Bernard Shumi saying that architecture is not about form and space, but it's about the event. Later on, I can talk more about the event itself. So the event itself is the activator of the spaces. And another thing is from David Green, from Archigram. He was saying that when it's rain in Oxford circus, the rain is more important than the building. But in this sense, I would argue that it's not saying that architecture or the building is not important, but it's just that the building become a background. So there is this figure and ground and foreground and background are always important to allow us to understand. So as an architect, if let's say we wanted to be a background, how can we be a background? If let's say we want to be the focus, we understand how much should we push, so that we don't have to appear too egoistic in a way.
And there's something interesting in there and what you're saying, and I want to take a detour on the not the next question, but an extra question for me myself, because like you talk about the limited and obsolete, right? And then like you said that it is not a bad thing, it's a good thing, And then like because for myself I believe that limitation create creativity, and that's where architecture flourish. That's why with this limitation, right, is kind of like make us more creative, finding a way on how to do it, on how to give a proposal, and how to think outside the box. What is your comment on that actually?
Well, I think that's very true. I think in architectural design or in practice, I still can remember we do have a lot of mock-ups and also a lot of design processes. And in the end, if I wanted to apply this kind of Darwin idea, or even Richard Dawkins, or even Mark Pagel, those are the people who talks about evolution and also anthropologists in a way. And there's one particular point that I really like, is that they are talking about competition. And even though out of so many things, like for example, when you go to supermarket, if you want to choose a chocolate, there are like 10 types of chocolate, but you only can choose one. So the options itself, they are actually competing in a way to fit your taste. So this kind of competition is good, but then it's good also because of the filter. Because if let's say you want to choose a chocolate, first perhaps you want to filter by price, or you want to filter by the packaging, is it looks nice or not, and then or also the reputation, like, oh, Ryoga told me that this chocolate is nice, then perhaps I will go for that. So this kind of limitations, or what I would call the filter, is actually good to allow us to choose. But before we have this filter, we have a plethora of choices and options. So natural selection is quite an interesting word. Let's put natural aside, but in speaking of selection, it's actually a choice that we make out of all the filters and also limitations. So that's what I thought.
Okay, let's go back to our question. Our topic for this year is urgency, right? It's urgency, and then like, what do you think, like your project in this kind of like event and podcast and stuff like that is like have an important contribution towards the architecture body of knowledge itself? Either is it practical or is it philosophical? And then like how what if it's important and urgent, like why it's not widely discussed, like the common thing right now, which is like climate change, housing issue, and stuff like that.
I think that's a very good point, and the topic is called urgency. But funny thing about urgency is that, for example, like your project, you are talking about this kind of deer meat, and also how to, and about its ritual. This is a rather the position or perspective from an architect. But the urgency that somehow born out of this, you mentioned like philosophical or practical, I think it's a both side of the information, in a way that, because all these like Darwinian ideas, or even talk about anthropologist ideas, those are philosophy. But when is it possible for me to philosophize practice in a way that to challenge how we work? Because what we work is actually somehow kind of a lot of people actually doing it. Like for example, how you bridge architecture and deer. For other people, perhaps architecture and storytelling, architecture and political issue like Hong Kong, and the riots going on, and also the political issues get going on with the environment. So I always thought that the urgency is to look at what if we are talking about architecture itself, the architects, and I find it very interesting that because we don't talk about architects, you just simply open like a website and like ArcDaily, it's all about architecture. It's about beautiful images of the buildings, and then we know who's the architecture. But do we really know like is the architecture firm doing well, or are they doing for reputation or portfolio and this? And there's this Japanese architect who did the very recent Serpentine Pavilion, and then he was, people found out that he didn't pay the interns and things, and then the interns have to bring their laptop or whatsoever. So my point is to explore this kind of practical side about the culture, the working culture in architectural practice. And I found out this is very interesting because in my unit I found out that people are doing the pretty much that direction in a way, provocative idea of climate change or LGBT or liberty, or talking about this kind of freedom. But then that one is talking from an architect, but we don't talk about architects itself. So that's what I feel like we are swimming in this swimming pool, but we didn't realize what is the perimeter of this swimming pool. We have to step back out to see, okay, are architects doing well? And this is somehow related to a research that I found out. Perhaps this data from 5 or 6 years ago, there is this data and a statistic saying that from part 1 to part 2, it's actually 50% is gone. Where are they going? Where did they go? And then from part 2 to part 3 is another level. If let's say we understand and we define architects in a way, part 3 is architects, then technically we are quite little with architects in a way. Because if let's say we are talking about part 1 as an architecture student, then must be a lot of people there. And I'm not saying that architects are bad in a way, but it's just that architecture should liberate in a way that someone still need to work on the construction industry. But it's just that with the generalized knowledge, we could do more than that. It's about this kind of bridging knowledge and stuff. But of course, like let's say like Foster and Partner, they are still an architectural practice, but inside they have a lot of things going on, like product design, furniture design, or R&D. So I like this kind of a multidisciplinary within a sphere.
I see. I want to take another detour, because like this is quite interesting. We're talking about like working culture of architects, sorry, not only in practice but like in school as well.
Yeah.
And where I see what's good about Strathclyde is like they're start not doing that, that toxic or hard work, like glorifying not sleeping, glorifying drinking more coffee, that kind of thing, and like this kind of thing, like you go to a very famous architect to not to get paid to get the knowledge. Like I don't know about this romanticizing, right? But like I feel like it's quite toxic, and like probably because like architects, it's not a career or a job, it's more like an apprenticeship, where you learn from the masters.
But I think that's pretty much, I do think this kind of apprenticeship is good, to go back this kind of art and craft, this kind of learning process where you actually go through it, instead of, I think nowadays is somehow kind of like taking a lot of shortcuts, because computer did a lot of things for us. So in that sense, I mean, Rene Descartes also mentioned it, saying that architecture is like chasing after something, which I don't agree, not really totally agree, in a way that because architecture is the byproduct of a certain phenomena that we learn. For example, we inspired by Black Lives Matter, for example. So that is an event. But before the Black Lives Matter, I believe that architecture somehow shaped people's mind to think or to say a certain things. Like even a public square is a good place for people to demonstrate. So architecture is a byproduct, but doesn't mean that it can't interfere other people, or can't influence other people or next generation. So I think it's a very interesting thing that architecture always comes as a secondary thing, because the first thing we wanted to talk about, do we really need the building? So after that, then we come up with the building.
Correct.
But doesn't mean that this byproduct will somehow interfere or interrupt into these another steps where architecture is the new issue. So it's a very funny thing. It's like we are solving the problem that the problem could have just not exist. But then we create a new solutions for the new problem, and then we keep on looping. I really particularly like this quote from New Architects. It says British architecture, I believe that it's not limited to British architecture, it's all over the world kind of thing. British architecture has never been short of talent, but it can only ever be as strong as the culture of patronage. Whether you are looking for an architect to refurbish your house or reimagine a public institute, you will find no shortage of worthy contenders in the following pages. I think it's not limited to this book also. I mean, anywhere you just can find any, like a yellow books of architects. I think the event that I'm trying to propose is like a yellow book where you can find architects plus something in this proposal where architects mix with movie director, architects mix with broadcaster. So this kind of mixing is not possible for a lot of people because they find it that it's a lot of work. But so that's why I think this project is kind of like a testing ground for you to have a taste like, this is how a podcast run and how a film could be run. And also photography, I think architecturally we focus on visuals a lot. But how many of us actually understand how the camera works and also the apertures, lights, lens, and those are the things that to enhance the architectural elements or even the photography as a whole. So I'm more supportive and also agree with the holistic understanding of a certain approach rather than hire someone to do it. Of course, that one is specialized. I hire a professional photographer to take a photo. But why don't, if I can understand the photography as well, then we can also somehow understand how it works in terms of how we perceive, how eyes see a building. But doesn't mean that we have to follow the photography when we design. But it's just that to understand as a holistic, then it will be better. But that comes to a problem because I think the guy called Joseph Hunt, I think, he also say if let's say architecture you want to study everything, it's perhaps like 22 years.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, how to finish it in 4 years?
Yeah, we are a late bloomer, man.
Yeah. and architecture, always everyone say, I think beyond English always say it's art and science. I mean, it's true, but art and science isn't it everything.
No, yeah, correct. I mean, that's true. That's how I get trapped in architecture in the first place. Like I want to do art, and it's like, hey, architecture, art and science.
Yeah.
And I love it, man.
Yeah.
I never been glad not studying architecture. It's
really
a journey, a pleasure.
But don't you think art and science in this sense is like, if let's say you don't want to do fine art, which a lot of Asian family would say art cannot make money.
Correct.
So they thought that, okay, why don't you do engineer? But engineer is too hard, too scientific. So you do architecture.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty, because I think we graduated from architecture school, we have this kind of choice. Because I think within our friends community, we somehow can see, are you the art architecture or science architecture?
Correct.
So you are like a much more science architecture with all this research and things, and then with a storytelling narrative, some with the more abstract. Then they would go for the art architecture. But in the end, the architecture as the bridge to bridge the idea, what you want to say and in your mind, and how to transfer it into drawings. I think
correct. It's a make your idea concrete, make your ideas like a physical being.
Yeah.
Correct. So let's go back to our question, because like I've been reading all of your. We've been working together on the project.
Yeah.
I've been not working together, but like in the studio. Like I don't
criticism.
I don't know help you. Just like bounce ideas in there, but like you did mention it previously a little bit about architecture as a picture, and you don't know the architects. So it's in a sense like it reminds me of your writing called Architecture Without Architects.
Yeah.
Right. And then you did mention about Darwinian theory as well a lot. And then we talk about this selfishness and competition, right? And then there is another way where architects need to be selfless and make a place of our community. These two things, like you keep bringing them together, it's Darwinian and your project and your events, like is quite contradictory. Like how can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, because in speaking of Darwinian idea, it's a kind of, the whole idea is two things. One is survival, one is competition. So we can't deny the fact that, of course there is another realm. People would argue that there is no competition, we live together harmonious. But I believe that this is kind of like a survival and competition. When you're out there, you have to bid for a project. It's just simply looking at the design competition. How many companies they are fighting for the entry. So this is the kind of like a competition.
That's it.
And which is very contradictory to Bernard Rudowski, Architecture Without Architects, or there's another Egyptian architect called Hasna or something. So their role is rather documentary in a way that they go document the vernacular architecture.
I see.
And speaking of vernacular architecture, I do think that they do have architects, but it's just that they don't recognize or they don't know that or they don't need architects as a title.
Correct. Yeah.
Because like kampong houses, you just build it. You don't need to someone like someone famous and say this is designed by who. It's just anonymous thing. So for me, when I was doing my project, I put, because I don't believe two things at one time, so I put it in a sequence where the Darwinian idea and also this kind of competition ideas, put it as a frontier to examine what kind of problem that we have in architectural practice. And then after that we see, if let's say we wanted to ensure and maintain this kind of competitiveness, after that how can we ensure that it is actually a open and generous platform for people to learn and grow together. That's where the beauty to to understand competition in a better way, not just like I want to kill you, you want to kill me kind of thing. It's about like competition, we grow together. So like Bernard Rudowski, that one is a rather documentary. They are not asking like finding out who is the architects. It's rather finding out this kind of documentary of cultural elements, like how do they design their house, or even like Julia Watson, low tech kind of thing. They are indigenous people. They don't really asking for like who invented this. And this idea of invention is very, very, very focused and centric into the role of architect, saying that, oh, I designed this, I must win award for this. I mean, I can't deny that one is very useful for companies. They wanted to, to have the portfolio or mileage in a way. So the first part is, I think it's more important to aware of the competition, the landscape or the environment that we have now. And then after that, see, is it possible for us to not to appear to be too egoistic or arrogant in front of the general public?
Correct. Yeah.
And if let's say we are designing for the people, the idea of the people is very broad. Who are we design for people? I mean, usually like Richard Rogers also talk about a place for all people. All people, what people, Is this a rich people or poor people? And of course, like, but then you are talking about like this kind of public realm. Not saying that poor people cannot go, but it's just that it's not organic.
Yeah.
When you compare to like medieval cities in Italy, that one is more organic, more unplanned in a way. So I think this kind of selfishness and selflessness is a very interesting interplay, which I try to achieve in my project, where this kind of duality is important. That we have to understand what are the limits and also what are the freedom. So how I did it is, I did a sketch also. So there is a grid and then the amoeba inside there.
Okay.
so the grid itself is actually the control. So for me, I designed the control first.
Oh, I remember this painting. Okay.
Yeah, that's the tool. So for me, I start. Of course, the other people would design the amoeba first, then only grid inside.
Correct, yeah.
That could be another way. But for me, I think as a project, it's easier for me to design that I give you a framework. Let's say I give you a bowl, and then that's it. And then you want to fill in what kind of object is up to you. But at least I give you a bowl so that you understand what is the boundary of this, filling.
Yeah, correct. You cannot put a car on the bowl.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. That's the thing. Yeah.
But you can put a melon or a milk.
Yeah, and then you can put a cereal or whatsoever. Yeah. It's up to you. Correct. Yeah.
And like, can we take another detour?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's go another detour. You said that this architect, right? Architects, you in kampong houses, they don't give a damn of like who's the architect is, because I think architecture right now become not a necessity but like a luxury, right? That's one. And then you say about like in the selfishness and competition is not killing each other,
Yeah.
But in that sense, right, it reflects on our studio culture as well, where we give criticism while competing with each other. It's a very weird thing. I find architect very masochistic. Like, oh, love working very hard, passionate about it, but then tired, bro. But like, love getting criticized to improve themselves. It's really masochistic.
Yeah.
A masochistic career, I think. And then like the third one that I want to say that you can elaborate on this three. Is you said that in the past the medieval city is more kind of like
organic
and sprawling and stuff like that. But like, I want to challenge that. Is it that we romanticize the past because we don't understand it we don't live on it. You know,
Yeah.
that's why we romanticize the future, because
Mm.
we don't live on it. In fact, there's a lot of beauty in everyday life. You know, there's making coffee, ritual making coffee, rituals of cooking and stuff like that. That we fail to find the beauty inside this mundane things.
I think that's very interesting also. I think in speaking of mundane reminds me of Lina Bobadi. And Lina Bobadi also I think sort of resonate with Corbusier, I think, but I mean, Corbusier, maybe not a good example. But anyway, but Lina Bobadi was saying that architects should be a civic servants. By means of civic servants, I believe that in Malaysia, you know, like after independence, architects are pretty much working in the public works.
Okay.
So they don't have this kind of a private practices. So technically, if you want to talk about it, right, in Malaysia, it's actually quite new in speaking of architectural scene. I mean, if let's say you want to compare to Bruno Leschi, Botticelli, Michelangelo, those are like, I don't know, like 400 years, is it? Yeah, 400 years ago, about 500 years ago. So we can't, I think we can't, there is a certain control that we shouldn't over glorify and also underestimated. In a way that there is a limit. But then, should I say like glorify or celebrate the past? I think we don't have to celebrate, but rather learn from the past. Because there are cities like the little towns in Italy or in Europe or any part of the world, or in Malaysia, the old town, they are actually evolved for so many years already. And at that point of time, that perhaps there's no one actually go and design the things. Yes, there are people like, and then to establish this kind of grid system or things, so there must be a certain people who actually do things like that. But if you look at into something that like Barcelona, Barcelona is a very great thing. But then if you look at from another side, it's rather off grid, totally off grid. But then this kind of off grid give you an element of surprise where you don't expect a certain thing. I mean, just simply look at Glasgow city centre. One line you can see the buildings all along the wall. But then if you go to High Street, or perhaps like in back then they call it a Haymarket or something. So this kind of a twist and turn, or in Edinburgh, so there is this kind of a very interesting place where it's not because of the architects, but it's because of the people. They think that, hey, why don't I can put a land, things like that.
So we need a bakery here, so we build bakery here.
And it's because back then it's like, I believe all the grass and things, they don't have really like a bylaw, or there's a sort of like authority to talk about. So there is this kind of organic, is very people centric, because there is no such authority. I mean, do you call it?
I think there's a part of authority that become a limitation, and it created that way. Maybe it is not. Maybe there's a thinker and as well in the past, but like we found beauty because like it just happened to be like that. Because like if you said that if I go to Singapore, or if I go to Tokyo, I can find the beauty on the grid, on the order as well. So there's always a lot of beauty in this kind of thing. Maybe it's just a different beauty, left and right, man.
I think in speaking of the grid and this kind of flexibility, also, I mean, Ren Koolhaas also mentioned it quite well in Delirious New York. It's like this kind of grid is like it's like an ocean. You think about it, it's like an ocean with a river, like a cutting through this kind of grid. But I give you a plot of land, so there is, I don't know how many grids, like thousands of grids. So different island is appointed by different kind of architects to do it. So it's very interesting. Is what I thought is like with a grid, but doesn't mean that I control you, so you can have fun with each island. So that's what I hope to achieve. But then also there is on the flip side, there are also people who actually did another way where I give you an amoeba and then you do a grid inside there. That could be another way. So I think that one is rather like a disruptive aesthetic. So you find order in disorder. And then New York is a rather new town. From New York, from New Amsterdam to New York. So it's rather new things, and then within the grid, but they still can have fun. So there are different kind of approach. Of course, not everyone enjoy New York, but I think it's a very interesting way to look at it. I think simply look at Glasgow also. Different kind of block have different kind of patterns and identity.
Okay, let's go back to from the detour and return to the question that we need to talk. Okay, you did your project is all about events, right? And it's a big word. What is event? And like what is the connection with events and architecture? I mean, like architecture happening even happening in architecture, but like in a sense, your project is more than that because you try to bridge event and architecture.
Yeah.
Event and architecture, and then how you see that, like correlate and relate to each other.
Aldo Rossi say architecture is a mediator of event.
I see.
But for me, why don't we take off the mediator in a way? Architecture is event.
Okay.
And I think Werner Sumi also kind of like a very into this kind of event cities. And perhaps instead of identifying what is event or what is architecture, I would say, why don't we see what is not architecture, what is not event? Okay, but Adolf Loos, he mentioned a very interesting thing. He say only a very small part of architecture belongs to realm of art, tomb and monument. So, so other than that, it's not architecture. You see, does it mean that? But
why is that? Quite interesting if you think about it.
I think he was saying I think he mentioned that in ornament and crimes. So he was saying that this kind of element of eternity, because monuments and tombstone, you kind of like untouchable kind of thing.
Yeah,
I think that's why I see.
Oh, I kind of understand why he said that though.
Because it's about eternity, and also it's about this kind of ornaments, something minimal. I don't know, but that's a little quote I think is very interesting because that he put a very bold statement saying what is architecture. But for me, I think, okay, I don't want to say what is architecture, but maybe I can say what is not architecture from a very conventional and traditional idea, because we somehow very trained in my case personally. Event usually is really, when you talk about event, it's about concert, festival, music festival, or even a parade. Those are events. But for me to understand another level, where what about making a coffee? Is it an event? Walk to a market, is it an event? So to liberate our idea in that sense, that we give us more freedom and spaces to rethink what is actually an event. This same goes to architecture. What is not architecture? So the site that I chose is actually Kingston Bridge. So if a lot of people say architecture is about art and science, does it mean that the Kingston Bridge is not architecture? Because we always see infrastructure as an engineering part. But if you want to look at it as an architecture, it is quite architecture more than some architecture. It could be quite architecture more than certain buildings perhaps. But it's just that it's because of the scope. Like for example, we don't know about the structural elements and also integrity. Fine, we really not into that profession. But doesn't mean that we have to saying that, oh, this is an art of engineering. But it could be architectural. That's why I wish to challenge. And before I do my proposal, I kind of know that I want to do something with this bridge. Because one is because of unused space below the bridge. Second thing is the bridge itself is a piece of work, artwork in a way for me. And speaking of highways or motorways, they are pretty much common because of, I don't know, is it the modernism bloom, things like that. And if you look at the major city, they actually have a ring of highway, which is very interesting. If let's say I can propose this kind of idea into different kind of city, because you have already the existing structure and also the landscape that we have in major cities, then you can just transport around like a transformer, unbox and unfold into different kind of places. So that's pretty much about it, and I wish to challenge that event is no longer an event. Architecture is no longer an architecture in a traditional way that how we see things. So that's why I think this recording is very interesting, because it's also challenge how we work. Because we used to drawings and things. I think because of COVID also somehow give us a lot of flexibility to try out GIF, video, recording, painting, perhaps like you did, or physical model, or interviews, or podcasts, or forum. So those are the things that I think is not architectural, but I think architectural non-architectural things are as important as architecture. So there is this very funny understanding, like if you are not practicing as an architect, then you are not an architect. I think that's a very wrong thing, because I think we are living in an information age. Plus, like seeing like Uber is a very interesting company where they started off as a car rental taxi service without a car. And also like Spotify, they don't have a music company, but they actually have, that same goes to Netflix. So we are in the age where we can cross boundary.
Yeah, correct.
We it's good to understand our boundary, but it's just that doesn't mean that we have to stay inside this boundary and then we can always cross over. Yeah, I wonder what do you think also. I mean, I sort of share my thoughts and also project to you, and not sure, perhaps you have some reflection on the drawings and also the concept and also the whole idea of the architects as well.
No, what I found really interesting for your project, I don't know if you realized it or not, because like in Glasgow, they demonize the motorway. Wow, they cut the cities, and like cut the things that is all unconnected and stuff like that. But in a way, your project is celebrating that motorway, celebrating that boundaries between connection, and try to regroup them together. To bring event is to celebrate.
Because in speaking of Kingston Bridge, is a very for me from what I know from the news and not from the local. Because the bridge itself is actually seen as a sin in a way to cut through the old town of High Street, not High Street, Charing Cross Road. So a lot of people actually, from what I know, they don't like that project because it somehow kill a lot of us history and also past.
Correct.
But now we are in 2021. For me, is what can I do? What can we do? Do you want to demolish the bridge? You can't bring back the history anyway. So might as well just put more anticipation into this future, where the future could resonate a certain respect or celebration to the past, but yet at the same time we can progress further. So that's kind of like, what can we do? I mean, apart from moving forward, you can't go back also.
Correct. But I mean, like we should see the future as a positivistic kind of thing, rather than kind of like complaining and like. I mean, criticizing is good, but like, what can we do about it? You're right. And in here we choose to celebrate it. And to see the future as a positive.
I think like, in speaking of criticism, is allow us to reflect what we have done.
Correct.
But this criticism also very good to tell us what to do in the next future. And the future is tell us what to do. So it's a very interesting, this kind of duality reminds me of the Rene Descartes talking about body and mind. This kind of very contradicting things. It's like, you wanted to do but you cannot do, but then you cannot do but you have to do kind of thing.
And then like there's another point that you said before that is very interesting, is actually where this pandemic allowed us to cross boundaries. We tried a lot of like digital stuff, video and stuff like that. We tried to digital paint rather than hand paint. Talk about your project with your tutor in Zoom, which is weird. Man.
Pretty much from the start.
And then like I remember our smoke talk talking about rules is meant to be broken. And then this stuff, like crossing boundaries, broken rules. It's like I don't know, it's like breaking your bones to make it stronger. Because like if you go to Indonesia and there's one tribe called Bajau where there's the sea people. And then when they reach adulthood, what they do is like they swim down and they kind of like damage their ear, and then they put like a medicine to make it stronger, and later on they can dive further. So it's kind of like breaking boundaries, breaking rules.
But then they sacrifice it.
They sacrifice it, yeah. But I mean, after the sacrifice, you have gain, and maybe this is what architects see themselves, like they
don't want to sacrifice.
They sacrifice, man. They sacrifice their time, their life. Sometimes, you see like a lot of we if we want to go back to and we want to relate to that. Oh, nice work, but we don't know if architect do well. This reflect on like student works. Like, oh my God, this guy got, man. They're drawing this thing that you don't know, but how hard he worked. He have a life. If he go out to with his friend, or he just stay out in his room, he stay in room like doing the rendering and shit like that. I mean, like this like glorifying the picture without knowing the history.
But I think that's where the power of impression, because we see things from our eye. That's the first impression. And if we see works that really done nice, then we think that these people is really good. It's like a media, It's like a social media. If let's say today I take a photo of the book, then you might think that I'm a nerd and I like to read books. That's the image sculpting, But doesn't mean that it's totally wrong, because me myself actually do it unconsciously or subconsciously or consciously. Actually, the things that I wanted to do somehow also wanted to to think that I love books.
Yeah, correct.
So that's what happened in architectural, in a way that if let's say you stay back longer in the office, then people will think you're a hard worker.
Yeah.
But from the 9 to 6, perhaps you watch video from 9 to
Yeah,
12 o'clock,
right.
and then the only 6 hours you work,
Yeah.
and then you put the another 3 hours after work, then your boss will think, oh, you overtime, this is a good stuff.
Yeah, right.
So
This is like, it's a mind game, bro. It's a
Yeah.
mind game. But it's quite interesting because I see that there's a lot of people that is have problems with time management in architecture because like it's a creative thing. Sometimes you cannot push through that creative thing. I mean, like, I wanted to be efficient to do work sometimes, right? But like when you just finish and then you just get a ding, an idea, you just want to do it again.
that Eureka moment.
Yeah, man, fuck, man, it's so bad.
But I just wanted to ask, because there was one time I was in a panel discussion, but I was just the audience, and then the moderator asked, work hard or work smart? Which one?
Nah, work smart lah.
Yeah, but then you don't work hard, then you smart, but then the quantity that people see you, it's like inside I'm a kind person. But then from outside I'm like, looks like shit lah. So work hard in a way is the outside where people see you actually work hard. Then it's a very physical evidence in a way that I see, wow, Ryoga is hardworking. But then inside, whether you're smart or not, it doesn't really matter, because people have to understand into another, peeling off another layer of onions to understand what you're doing. So work hard in a way is a very, very appearance driven, where I see you as a clean guy, very smart, then okay, then I can trust you first. From the outside, I don't have to talk to you, I just from far, then I kind of like good impression of you. So, but work smart is another way that unless someone really understands you, that you actually did it quite well, So
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like another layer to peel that you.
that's why I think work smart is the layer that people don't see.
Yeah.
That's the problem with that. When we do a research, we can't say a certain research is not there just because we can't research.
Correct.
It's because we cannot blame that, wait, why come Google didn't show this result?
Correct. Yeah.
Why don't we put another question and say, why don't you didn't do research better?
Yeah. Correct.
So there are a lot of things that we cannot say is not there just because we can't find it. It's because we simply can't find it, then you can't get that result. So that's a, I don't know, it's a hidden thing, I would say. Work smart is a very hidden thing in a way that you have to understand someone and you find, wow, you are really work smart.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you actually didn't do that to achieve this, like you work smart. But I think like a lot it needed to be both. It needed to be both. I mean, like, it's such a cliche thing to say.
Of course, everyone. Of course, everyone also want to do two things,
Yeah, but like, because like if you work hard with not working smart, you're like a donkey, bro.
Yeah, that's I mean, I'm not sure what to. This is part of the project that I wanted to say also. I think it's a kind of reflection from what I practice in some office. I found out that I'm just a cat monkey.
Yeah.
I just want, and then you found out that, like for example, like Bauhaus from year 4. I have two questions. One is, how odd are the chances for you to design a Bauhaus?
Yeah, that's true.
Let's say one Glasgow only have 5 Bauhaus, and then you have 100 students. That's competition already.
Correct.
And then the second thing is, if let's say a city full of buildings, what's next? And then this is very interesting in a way that to examine how about the sustainability. Architects love to use sustainability, but they didn't talk about the sustainability of the career and also the profession. If let's say a city full of building already, and we assume that the age of each building is 25 years.
Correct.
Means that you have to wait for another 25 years to turn over back, stop and renew. Okay, let's demolish this building and then we'll build a new one. By that time, right, it's only one architect or 2 architects only working on that project. So I think architecture need to expand and go out to think about this, because what if the city is full of buildings already? Where you want to go? You want to adaptive reuse, or you want to do a parasitic architecture, or you want to do a temporary building? Because all the buildings currently, they are like, with an expectation that at least once you build, at least 50 years or at least like 30 years. So if actually the building, right, we want it to last longer. But at the same time, if you want the building to last longer, meaning that there is a threat to our profession, you get what I mean?
Correct.
Because once you build faster and longer, meaning that you have lesser space to grow.
That's interesting though. Yeah.
Don't you think so?
Yeah.
We really hope that our building can last longer because you don't want to see like, oh, my building get demolished because people don't like it. That's a very bad portfolio and reputation. But at the same time, we don't want it to be too long because there will be no chance for us to build. So there are two things. One is either you go to countryside like Remco has proposed. Then you kind of create this kind of suburban and become urban, new cities and stuff. So that's one way to.
But if we keep doing that, we will run out of the suburban spaces as well.
Yeah, because that's what the countryside about. You're trying to bash all the countryside and then to modernize it.
Correct.
So that's one way that all the big guys like Remco was thinking. But of course he didn't have this kind of plan. I mean that the exhibition is rather speculative ideas and also the research and documentary about it. And another flip side is that like renovation. I believe that everyone also wanted to live a better life. Then they hire architects to renovate or do things like that to suit their own taste. But how long is this run? Then I'm not sure about this because this is something to do with the fee. How about the financial sustainability of a certain architectural practice? That's why I thought event is good in a way. It's short life.
Correct.
But doesn't mean that the fee is not good.
It's a temporary architecture.
It's ephemeral architecture in a way that we celebrate these kind of short-term things, but we can do more. Instead of I don't know. Perhaps for me, I just wanted to do. Let's say 5 years, I can do 50 projects of short one compared to 5 years do 2 projects. I prefer the first option. So that it's about this kind of public perception also. It's about awareness of how public see architects. That's very important because architects rarely hire another architect to design things.
Because I think like we in our education, right, we do everything by ourselves.
Exactly.
We do everything by ourselves. Rendering, design, drawing, narrative, presentation, everything by ourselves. It's so rare to see a group thing, and that's why like we want it to be our project, and no, my project, not our project. There's the mind in architects is so strong.
Yeah, and speaking of this kind of, it's the selfishness that I would like to celebrate in a way, to be proud and to be more proud of the ownership of the certain project, which is good. But I think there is a certain control in a way that selfishness should understand what we need and what we want. So generally we have to understand, if we talking in a business term, like where are the clients? I mean, there is, let's say we look at the Pareto principle. 20% rich people, 80% are normal people. The 20% is a super rich. They can hire like, I don't know, like Foster, KPF, all these big corporates to do it. But then about another 80% are architects doing, for these people. Of course they do. But it's just that, how about like if we split like the economic classes into like 3 classes: high class, middle class, and low class. But doesn't mean that low class cannot enjoy architecture.
Correct.
Yeah, so we have to understand this kind of bigger crowd in a way. But I'm not saying that we want to earn their money. But it's just that it's to allow them to explore and experience architecture in a better way and better accessibility. I think that's what I pretty much wanted to do, and trying to come up with cheap materials or something more mundane, something more mediocre.
Relatable?
Yeah, something more relatable. It's something, if you want to talk about marble, for most of people, maybe, of course I like marble, but it's just that if I can't afford it.
Correct.
So there is this gap where it's something related to our wanting and also needing. So I think that's the long way to go, and I believe that a lot of architects and also like the RBA or whatsoever, they have been talking about it. We have to understand that architects are sort of like a very service-based industry.
Correct.
We don't sell cup or books, yes, maybe some. But we don't sell chicken rice. So we're selling a service in a way that service is kind of very hard to identify in a way.
It's a service that ended up as a product. Actually.
As a product, we turn
very, very interesting. What industry do that actually? If you think about it.
No, actually,
a service that become a product in the end.
Yeah, I mean that's. But speaking of service, right?
Are we selling service or product?
we are actually selling the service first then product.
Yeah, right. It's quite interesting.
But I was reading this book called Money. The reason why if let's say people wanted to hire you, is to make a certain things more valuable.
Yeah.
Let's say for example a plot of land, and then I say, Ryoga, can you turn this into a student hostel, and then I can earn money, right? So that's a value there's a value there. And speaking of the economical term, that's why they wanted to earn money, and then they hire you to uplift the market value. So that's what pretty much the architects do in the service. That's why they hire certain people to do the thing.
Yeah.
It's a service to uplift the value. That's pretty much about it. That's why we need our service.
Yeah.
But in speaking of, let's say we wanted to target the middle class and low class, right? If let's say our focus is not about earning their money, it's rather to allow them to serve, to enjoy experience the architecture as a public, like a civic servants in a way. So our focus is not about like earning them their money. It's about let them to see this is architecture in a sense.
I think this is like really relate to the gospel of Ashraf. our
Lecturer.
teacher, lecturer of Ashraf, professor, is like because he talked about this kind of democratizing architecture. Even he used the democratizing education a lot in our class. And we talk more about like how we can democratize this thing.
Yeah.
Because like he wanted to bring architecture not only for the rich people that you said, but it's more to the all people. That's why he goes around to Doha and then like a lot of like Middle Eastern cities and see the courtyard and see the places and do research there and questionnaire and stuff like that. I think it's really related to him.
But if let's say we wanted to target on that kind of thing, right? Our motivation is more on the well-being and also the enjoyment or pleasure. Maybe not pleasure, but about happiness, let's say. For people to be more living better in a way. But in that sense, right, how do we know that whether do we need architects? Because those kind of things that you could have done by yourself. And then what's the point of hiring an architect? What's the point of involve architects? With the reason why we need architects, unless they have a certain expertise or knowledge to do the things. How to get the bylaw, how to get it done, how to build the things, how to construct, how to understand the urbanism. That's what the architects pretty much know about it, right? But if let's say we wanted to talk about like Jonas Fredman is has a very interesting book called Architecture for the People, with the People, by the People. So in that sense, who's architects? If the people can do it already, But then Jonas Fredman also argued that architects also people. So in that sense, I do like architectural knowledge in a way that we learn a lot of things.
Yeah, man.
and the beauty of this project is that we don't want the architects to be the leader, but they could be the curator, I would say, the people who coordinate. They help organize, but they don't lead. They rather is putting people together. Group people together, but doesn't mean that you have to lead them. It's just saying that it's a collective.
I want to use one word to describe it, but I mean like because we butcher this word a lot and we don't understand this word. It's anarchist. Anarchist is like without any leadership, but like it's togetherness. I mean like we can learn from the Ukrainian anarchist army where if a communist come to your village and then take your face, we're going to liberate you, and you're under my command. But when the anarchist comes, like, hey, you're liberated from any government, do whatever you want. And then they just left, bro.
Yeah.
And there's the Black Ukraine. But because we used anarchist, like, wow, no order. Yeah, there is no order. There is order in disorder. Because like the togetherness, you develop these codes, like you need to learn battle ethical and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean it just means there's no leading government, there's no leading figure, but you can respect someone, but it doesn't mean that the respectable figure need a title like a president or something like that.
I think that's the toughest part, where how to balance these two.
Correct, yeah.
Like
I think that's why capitalists win.
I think
natural selection.
I think the project, because of after that I realized that there a very interesting word is to industrialize.
Yeah, wow. And then now I'm sitting in my project, it's like, don't industrialize too much.
But because from my perspective, capitalism make things work, you know.
Yeah. Because competition.
Because
I think it goes aligned with capitalism goes aligned with natural selection.
yeah, because it's about competition and
It's about
meritocracy.
Yes.
So in that sense, it works in a way that it's like working hard. You
Mm.
see things.
Yeah.
If you cannot do it, I prove to you.
Yeah, yeah.
I use
do
money.
better.
I use money to solve it.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. That's why it's like Yuval said that.
Harari, yeah.
Harari said that. Oh, actually, capitalism is the best thing happening. That's why we don't have war right now. Because
Wow.
like before, like you see the history, right? There's a lot of always war. But like we are living in a very peaceful moment where everybody have economic war a little bigger, but like not war killing, you know.
Right.
Like very peaceful because of capitalism. Because we are so busy on competing with each other in a different way.
But then I would see also money could bring in another war also, but it is not until like brutal war. kind of
Yes,
thing.
yes.
But there is a war. But if we wanted to romanticize this idea of war, it's actually competition.
Yeah, it is a competition.
So it's like, you know, like China and US, they are fighting each other, but then they somehow. That's why I think China is somehow, because of this kind of competition, they uplift so much. It's just simply looking at their GDP is crazy.
Yeah, and I believe like if the only moment, and I think in the future, if we band together as a species, like human, is if we found alien, because there's another competition.
Yeah,
It's a bigger competition.
But then
we forgot about things.
I think by the time when alien comes in, and then human will unify,
Yeah,
because
unify.
we have the common.
A stronger competition.
And whether it's enemy or not, that's another story.
Yeah, correct.
But then another phenomenon that I realized, that because China has holding huge wealth and power in a way by using money, and that's why we can see more projects happening in China.
Yeah, correct.
I wonder, what do you think also? Because I think somehow you can see, even though like it's everywhere. I mean, Oma,
Yeah,
Foster, Zaha, those are the big firms. They still want to do things in China. So there is this understanding in practice that you have projects that you wanted to run the project just for the money, but doesn't mean that it couldn't be interesting. And also another time where you wanted to reserve and do the things that you like.
Yeah.
So there is this bread and butter commission versus the things that you wanted to do but doesn't make a lot of money. So one is feeding the money, one is feeding the passion.
But I mean, like, I think we need to. I mean, it's cliche, it's the balance and stuff like. But like, it's when the opportunity arises, grab it.
Yeah.
And do the best in the opportunity.
Yeah.
I think we need to have that kind of mentality. Even though like, oh, there's an opportunity, not a lot of money, just grab it and do the best on that. I mean, like, there's a selection. The thing that you said,
Yeah.
is the packaging is good, the price, how is it, and stuff like that. We have our natural selection.
Yeah.
But like, as an architect, you say, 100 architects, only 5 bathhouse.
Mm.
When the opportunity arises, grab it.
Right. In natural selection, there is actually a few elements to the natural selection lah. I mean, I don't want to abuse this thing, but I just wanted to mention, because I also doing this thesis on it. It's called Vista.
Vista.
V for variety of variations, I for inheritance, S for selection, T for time, I think, something like that. A, I also forgot. So there is actually this Vista that drive the selection. So you can say Vista is like a filter. So in speaking of, I think perhaps we can replace natural selection as a sustainability in business term.
Yeah.
Because actually my project is kind of very business thing.
Yeah.
So
It's quite interesting you put business architecture where architect does not talk about business.
okay, now think about it. In architecture school, we don't talk about money.
Yeah, we don't talk about
That's the
business.
thing.
Yeah.
And we somehow see money as a sin in
Yeah,
a way
yeah.
that we want to leave the money from this temple
Correct.
of art.
Correct. I'm just like, oh, I don't want to be scarred.
Yeah.
With money, right?
Yeah.
But like, and I go to real world and then like, people ask me, you do freelance? And I don't know how to charge, bro. How much do I need to charge to buy freelance?
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
And also the thing is that we take so many things for granted in a way that we thought that once we come out, we're gonna design museum.
Yeah.
But then once you come out and then when you go to an architecture firm, you do residential building, which is very rare in architectural projects. I mean some lah, because like I know some university they push this kind of assignment to do housing project. Or
Yeah, did you get housing project in your university? Because in the first 2 years we do a housing project for my university.
As in like high rise or what?
No, a very humble dwelling, a terrace house. And then like if you want to do apartment, you can. It's a very humble thing, a very humble beginning. And you see, 5 year we do. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
It's even what I'm doing with architecture. I'm not sure anymore.
Yeah, but I think I'm not sure. Do you get this kind of idea? Because I think when I was doing the final year project, I find it very free.
Yeah, I agree.
Because free in a sense that let's liberate ourselves from figures and facts, like how much does this cost and things.
Yeah, no one.
Yeah, but then this is very. I think it's also the last opportunity for us to test this kind of idea.
Yeah.
And then after that, then we can talk about like housing market, like what kind of market actually like people actually asking for, and how many house should we provide.
I mean, if you can go that for your thesis, nobody going to stop you.
And
if you go the figure something like that.
Yeah, and Andrew mentioned a very interesting thing comparing doctor and architects. Let's say a master plan, right? Usually one firm can finish it, Let's say like a firm, an architect with another maybe 4 or 5 assistant architect can do with, let's say like 2,000 houses. You see, composite one person also can do so many high rise and then say, oh, I design how many occupants. But speaking of doctor, right? Doctor can't simply like one doctor then like copy and paste to like 2,000 people. One day they only can like this. So it's a very interesting thing that doesn't mean the skill is directly proportional to the opportunity. Because one architect can do technically like 5 houses, we might expect like 5 architects. But it doesn't work this way because one architect can do 5 houses also.
Correct.
But for doctor, it's person to person. So that's why in speaking of jobs and commissions, that could be quite tricky because architects are actually quite capable to do things so much. Of course, resources one.
A lot of competition, bro, in our industry actually. If you're a doctor, there's not one doctor need to do one patient. So very personal thing.
Yeah.
Art as well, art piece. You create one art.
Yeah, but
engineering? How about engineering?
Engineering, I think quite specific also, right? But I think infrastructure wise, they can copy and paste.
Yeah, right. It's the same thing.
But then the thing is that I don't know. Maybe doctor can copy and paste or not. Maybe in another realm, I don't know. But the thing is that very specific. But because like for example, let's say one architect only design one. The one is private bungalow already, right? But then if let's say a terrace houses, you just flip, mirror. That's where
sorry.
It
reminds me something else.
The grid, right? Yeah. That's why the grid comes in because we are controlling the grid.
Yeah.
And then what happens inside the house? That one is after you pass the key to the occupants.
I mean, but I believe, right? You still talk about doctors and architects. Maybe in the future, doctor will be replaced as well, as a copy pasting thing. Like we have the technology and machine now. Now they're starting to have surgery, with robot. That meme surgery on the grid.
Yeah.
I feel like they're starting to kind of like how to copy and paste because it less cost and more efficient,
safer also. If
safer. It's safer. That's quite very interesting.
Yeah, I think that could be another thing that we can reflect also lah. I think it's about the sustainability in a way in the long run lah. I mean, my project is kind of like thinking about this kind of idea where what architects would be in 2050, which is not far away, maybe in another 30 years. And RBA, they did this report and a lot of people actually start to realize that don't have to be an architect to do a lot of things. Like Andrew also mentioned, architects is like the title architect is like a title but not the function. So like you said, freelance, I can do drawings like architect also, right? But then it's just that to authorize to specialize that thing is another level. So that one we should think about it also.
I think we need to authorize because like there's a safety.
Yes, that's the key thing. That's the thing that we want to regulate. Like Greenfield Tower is the thing that we start to realize that the importance of a professional architects. Of course, that case maybe will involve with other like contractors and suppliers lah. But other than that, in speaking of creativity, that's where the problem is. My family will ask if I can design from Pinterest and then I buy the things from Taobao or things like that. Why do I need you kind of thing,
Yeah.
So really you have to think like architects. in the future we do what? I mean, in the economical terms, yes, we have to understand how to live a living, you know, how to run a office financially, but at the same time we have to understand like how not to take money too seriously, so that we can help people and we can help people to uplift this kind of lifestyle and standard.
I mean, like, okay, yeah, this is spoken from my experience. I'm going to add something. I'm designing last 2 years before I designed a house, an extension of house for my aunt, and then like I designed like blah 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 blah, and then like what she said to me is like, right now after all of these years I live, I started to understand why we need architect from a mundane people, you know, because like now that my spaces have a lot of lights, a lot of fresh air. There's the first thing that if we people just do and like design their own space, they do it because they need more space. They don't give these other things to bring. And where in architecture we learn so much about it, the importance about flow, about lights, about and it's so complex. It's so hard to say why we did it like that. But it's because of a lot of consideration in the end. But like what make me happy as an architect when she said that, oh, she suddenly understand why
we need architects.
Why we need architects.
That's I think I always thought that to hire an architect is rather a want already. I mean, architecture without architects, like Bernard Rudowski talking about it, that one is not really an aesthetic. It's a rather simply just want a function, like how to draw out the hot air from this house, or how to build mud house, you know. So at that sense, really we don't need architects, you know, but we need architects unless to, I think at some point to elevate our taste in a way, or that's why we find the architects that we really suit our taste. That I really like, let's say high tech, then I will get high tech people. I like this kind of curve design, then I will get the curve people to do it. So it's rather a taste. But in speaking of need, I believe that there are people like Architecture for Humanity, or small practices like Assemble, or Roto in Belgium. They are doing things that differently to make people to engage architecture in a very broader terms. It's not saying that I want you to hire me kind of thing, but rather is I can do architecture but not in a very straightforward way, like a consultancy firm. Yeah. So that's a very good question in a way, that why architects, why people hire architects? Because I'm not saying that architects should work free.
Yeah, correct.
You know, we are actually go through the whole education. I don't know how many, at least 6 years.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we should do free, but it's just that we have to understand how to keep the balance between you don't want to make things tough for the people to engage the architecture, but at the same time you want them to pay for it in a way. So it's a dilemma, I would say lah. I mean, plus if let's say you in one time you can only do two or three projects, and then somehow you have to do more, then it's just bringing the suffering to us. Perhaps we are like the budget people. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's the reflection about it lah.
It's a very interesting project I've been seeing from your screen from the back.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very new to me. And because like we talk about a lot of stuff, anthropologies and stuff like that, and then you talk about ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, because this is a final year project, we have to think like what we're gonna be. Whether you want to be a researcher or writer or author or poet, you have to think about a way to sustain yourself. How do you want to pay the mortgage and also rental? That's a basic thing, I think. I stand from a point of view of a rather very practical and very realistic sense. So whether you wanted to elevate another taste or not, that's another story. But first, this is a very the what's a Maslow need kind of thing, you know. We have to stable ourselves at the bottom first. Then only we can talk about more.
Yeah, correct.
So the architect's always at the top there. I mean, like, why we hire architects? Why we hire architects? Because on the top, because you have to pay the architects, right?
Correct.
So if I wanted to save money, then might as well I just do it by myself.
Yeah, true.
You know, so by event perhaps, because I think events is not really it's not gonna be a big thing. It's gonna be like workshops or information or content creation.
Because of pandemic, or is it like just in the future?
I think in the future also, but before that, you simply look at YouTube. I mean, YouTuber can be a not professional, a career.
They are a career already.
Yeah. So you're just simply looking at that is how it's not like why can't we apply that in architecture also? I mean, architecture, of course, there are people actually doing this kind of thing. It's like freelance, you know. If let's say I wanted to find someone to render, I will go to this person. If I want a good draftsman, then I'll go draftsman. But the thing is that in architectural practice, like after graduate, and then we expect that the fresh grad can do all things. So it's a good thing in a way that you can learn all at one time. But the bad thing is that it's not efficient, because what if I don't like realistic rendering, but you make me to do it, right? Then it is wasting time and also resources. So but I always thought that go through the general things first.
Yeah, you need to actually.
You understand the whole things first, then understand, okay, A, B, C, D, E, I prefer B, then let's go sharpen the B.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like knowing all colors and picking up color palette for a project.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think overall, architectural journey and knowledge is a very fun journey. I'm not sure. I hope you resonate there as well. But it's just that in a realistic side, what can we do, what can we do for ourselves and also others? So that's where the selfishness, in a way, to think about ourselves. I would say not selfish, selfish in a way, that to understand what do we really need and before we take care of others. I don't know, I just got inspired very much by Louis Kahn story, like people get bankrupt and stuff, but they still can't, even though he's a great architect, but can't financially stable.
He's a great architect, not a great businessman. You keep saying this
about
Louis Kahn.
Yeah, but maybe different story because he has like I don't know how many wives.
Not talk about his private stuff.
Yeah,
but, like, he's not a very good businessman because like but he can do like weird places, like where you do Bangladesh? Is it a Bangladesh?
Yeah, Bangladesh.
Yeah, it's a weird Bangladesh. How? Out of all place, Bangladesh.
That's what I think. That's what I think, right?
Who's a great architect doing Bangladesh? Just him.
I think I got a few lah.
Oh really?
Bangladesh. The parliament is it?
Yeah.
I think in Bangladesh. Yeah. But I just wanted to come back to this idea of businessman. I really think that architects, right, like Corbusier, right? Corbusier is not really he's not the greatest architect, I would say. He's the greatest businessman in architecture.
Yeah.
That's why I think another level that I was exploring in this project also is about the propagation.
Yeah.
And propagation in biological sense is about spreading this kind of, the longevity and also inheritance, right? Like after so many years, we still learn about Corbusier.
Yeah.
So there is this kind of survival of knowledge and information. How long can this knowledge sustain longer or sustain until a certain point? It's because this guy is really influential, and even though he's physically not around, but then we still learn about his things.
But I want to challenge the idea, like, if I think you're going to change your mind if you visit his building. You're going to think that he's a great architect.
Yeah, that's true also.
Because before I think Le Corbusier like that. What's so great about Le Corbusier? What's so great about this modern
Longchamp.
And I go to Longchamp, bro. It changed my mind. Man.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is architecture, and like it's kind of like stimulate and like make me excited with architecture as well.
But don't you think? Okay, let's come back to this idea of businessman. Means that he's very good at selling the idea to you.
Yeah. Correct. Like selling idea with a physical thing.
Yeah. He's selling the light. He's selling the shadow to you, and then you feel like, shit, this is architecture.
Yeah, bro. So what is architecture, right?
Yeah.
Let's not talk about that anymore. I'm like, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ryoga.
For the talk. This is very, very cool talk. I think we do this kind of talk so many times already. We reiterate and re-talk about it, and like every time we talk, I think we add something more. We understand what we are thinking more and more.
Perhaps this once this recording regularly released, then we hope that to get more feedback also.
Yeah, feedback from people.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks a lot.
Great.
Yeah, thanks a lot.